This is Apotheosis, the official podcast of the Production Designers Collective. I'm your host, Alexander Whittenberg, and I'm so glad you're joining us for the second episode of our ongoing odyssey into the world of film design. Today, we're going to turn on, tune in, and trip out with a true legend and fellow PDC board member, Rick Carter. After traveling the world in his early 20s, Rick began his career in production design under the mentorship of Richard Silbert. He started as an art director on films like The Goonies and The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. As a production designer, his rich collaborations with directors Steven Spielberg, James Cameron, Robert Zemeckis, and J.J. Abrams is reflected in many influential films, including Back to the Future Parts 2 and 3, Forrest Gump, Castaway, Amistad, The Polar Express, War Horse, The Post, Munich, Star Wars Episodes 7 and 9, and some of my personal favorites, including AI, Artificial Intelligence, Jurassic Park, and The Fabelmans. Rick earned Academy Awards for his designs of Avatar and Lincoln. I could go on with the list of accolades he's received, but most importantly, I want to say this. Rick creates space for my favorite type of conversation, and that's when you have more questions than answers in the end. It's his sense of curiosity and the generosity of his spirit that makes him so beloved in the world of production design. We recorded this conversation in December of 2024, and while there are older interviews with other designers in the archive that I'm excited to share, it felt right to kick things off with Rick's interview as we dive together into the core meaning of apotheosis and some ideas that spiritually set the tone for the whole podcast. So join us as we speak to the spirit of place, the art of time traveling, and the concept of scleropy, for which, if you've never heard that word before, you're in for a treat at the end of our conversation. One more thing to keep in mind. Due to the demanding schedules of those in our industry, the virtual studio space where these interviews are recorded is a nomadic and remote space. This leads to inconsistencies in quality when it comes to audio and video. That said, we'll do whatever we can to deliver the highest quality listening and viewing experience every time. Now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Rick Carter. There is one question that I start all of these conversations with, and that is, what does creativity mean to you?
Let me first ask a question, and then I will certainly do my best to answer that. What does apotheosis mean?
So apotheosis, actually, this came from the first Production Designers Collective in 2022. And the definition is it's the highest point of something or a climax of some kind. And the word came to mind when we all gathered on the final day of the Production Designers Gathering in 2022 up at the Ancient Theater. And so all of these people who had just had this really kind of amazing weekend, I think it was kind of an out-of-body experience for everyone there. We all made our way to the top of the hill, and maybe it was a bit of, this physical exertion of energy where it felt a bit winded. But as soon as we reached the peak, which was this ancient theater, which is a geographical high point in the land, it was like this really amazing feeling of this breath of not relief, but a very centering, meditative moment to have made it to a place that is very special, just because it's an ancient theater. So the stories that have been held there alone, it's a very kind of sacred place. But you also know that something special is about to happen there. The energy was just in the air. And I think the conversation that came from being at that point, which was the geographical apotheosis, but also it became the spiritual apotheosis because people were sharing their feelings about very deep, vulnerable, uh, reflections on the weekend, but also production design as a whole and sort of the bigger picture of what all of this is. And so I just really thought, this apotheosis is the word that came to mind. I also had this visual image of the Sistine Chapel, strangely enough. It's like looking up and seeing this really amazing spiritual image. And I tied those two together. And I thought, this is a mindset. This is a state of mind that I hope to always chase, is the apotheosis, which is just this sort of, it's really, quite honestly, it's hard to put into words, but this transcendent state of tuning into the world around you, taking in your surroundings, being present in the moment, and letting that reflect your work, but also how you behave and how you show up in the world and how you interact with other people. And apotheosis to me means all of that. I hope that was, um, I hope that made sense or was coherent.
Absolutely, to me. And I guess I have some follow-up questions.
Sure.
Because I think the questions will maybe indicate to you my answer about how I view creativity. So embedded in creativity for me, I would say, is questioning. And so you've invoked an experience that I was a part of. And so I have a visual reference, and I even know some of the steps that were taken to make that happen. The actual setting of the stage of that particular event in Spetses, and even where it went in terms of the various people and how they all contributed. There was a sense that was kind of had its own momentum, let's just say, from numerous consciousnesses at that time, and have continued, I think, actually to develop since that time, even through the last gathering. But also, I think something was understood there that is finding its way out into the world. So the questions, I think, are in some ways my own questions, but they're ones that almost anybody who's a production designer, I think, can ask of that apotheosis, whether you were there or not. If you weren't there, then it right away invokes something I think that is really a fun part of production design. And I don't mean fun in a light way, although it certainly can be a light way because it can be a joke, which is just asking the question of where are you?
Mm.
And when you ask the question, where are you? And then there's an answer that's forthcoming, or even not, but let's just say in production design, the question is, where are you? And let's say you're applying it specifically to a movie that you're working on, and then you're even applying it to a series of scenes that have been indicated either by written form or verbal form or wherever the idea came from, that there should be scenes that are going to be captured in some form with a camera, whether it's physical or digital or AI or however it's manifested and realized. The where are you is the question that the production designer is immediately tasked to help come up with an answer so that everybody else knows what to do, where to come, what they should expect, and in a sense, as Bob Zemeckis used to call it, what are the marching orders based upon that given, which is where are you? So in this particular case, we were on an island in Greece called Spetses. We'd spent a few days together. We were all of a type in that we'd never, no matter how far and wide we might have all traveled, and many traveled from all over the world to get there, we'd never been on an island with 250 people who were either production designers or aspiring to be production designers. who knew something about what it was, when those of us who are production designers and have been doing it for decades know how elusive it is to describe what a production designer does or even is. Now, you can break it down into all the things that we're hired to do physically and to be responsible for, the settings, physical, and the decisions to go digital in certain uh, movies, the manifestation of all the ways that can help a movie come into existence and be filmed or captured. That where are you has a meaning to the characters and the narrative, and of course then the director and the actors and the cameraman and everybody who comes to photograph it in one way or the other or behold it in one way or the other. So I like the idea that the where are you mattered in that conversation to those people, because they got tuned over the 3 days of courses to be sensitive to that aspect. And then we as a group, the collective, I think, seized upon that moment to understand that where we were mattered, that we were in Greece, that we could draw upon a heritage of what it is to be Greek, philosophically, and even maybe spiritually, maybe even culturally, maybe even you are Greek, or it's all Greek to you and you can't figure out any of it. The point I'm trying to make is that it's all a way that we got together in which apparently you got some form of a message that you decided to characterize, and now you're coming back with it in such a way that you're trying to give it words and maybe even imagery going forward as a point of reference to not only what was experienced then, but what is production design going forward, and how do we describe what it is. And you can, of course, go to the physical and the mental side of what you do. And as Richard Silbert, my production designer mentor, said, chances are no one will ever know what you do, no matter how much you ever try to explain it. And there's a reason for that.
Yes.
I've come to understand that I think what a production designer does in setting the stage or helping to set the stage for the I'll just say ... the idea, the movie, the scene, whatever you're setting the stage for, whether it's in a big sense or making a decision. It's designed not to be seen, because you want to believe the characters are real and you want to follow the narrative that they're in and believe that it's worthy of your attention, and you believe in it, and then you invest in it emotionally. And all of that wants to happen relatively soon in a movie. The suspension of disbelief means when you come off the street, you walk into the theater, or when you turn it on in your house, and you know reality, and now you're trying to be open to something that's not your reality and believe it enough that you get involved with it. How that's done is a bit of a magic trick. And we're very inherently a part of that magic trick. You don't want to be seen. Nobody wants to know that there's somebody behind the curtain manipulating this, or has spent months or even years figuring it out. That part of what I have referred to, and it's not me, but it's Aristotle's concept of the esoteric, is the going inward to find what it is that you want to express, along with the director, along with everybody else you're collaborating with in an art department. And that process of going inward, then by its very nature within the job of production design, leads you to needing to then go outward with it. You have to bring it out. Can't just be stuck on the inside of you and a few other people and be an elitist idea. It actually has to come out and then perform for the finances, the studio, the strategy, the crew, the actors, everybody that makes it into something that comes out from those esoteric inward explorations, which are already by their very definition kind of Greek in a Socratic way, meaning that you're exploring a subject, that there's value in doing that. So that's a very abstract aspect that becomes esoteric, so it becomes even less seen. However, when this thing that we do and we're a part of goes out to an audience and they see it in its most exoteric way out on the screen in some way, they then turn it into esoteric. They make it interior. They relate to it and they don't even know that anybody had an idea like that you might have had, or even that you didn't have. But the main thing is that there's something there that's vibrating with a drama or some aspect that people then relate to. And part of that is, where are they? Because where those characters are actually helps to determine what their drama is about. And if they're sitting at home, nothing has changed on that level, that's fine. It's a certain kind of story. But if you have visualized them going out into the world in any adventurous or broad way, somebody has to help figure out how to get all that stuff in front of the camera, or at least into the research enough so that it's passed into the digital realm, right? And then
Right.
those artists can make it. Now there's another player at the table of this. That's AI. Artificial intelligence may not seem to some people now to be at the table, but it is at the table in my estimation. And it was not discussed at that apotheosis because it's too threatening right now for most
Mm.
people to regard. They want to believe that their process is not going to have to involve this other entity that is not actually a consciousness. And it's a curatorial process, but it's so powerful that my estimation is that the times they are changing big time. And production designers and production design itself, I believe, is in a very, very good position to actually take this aspect of how things are made and realized and bring it into a process that we actually already understand. And that I don't think a lot of people see that yet, and people are going to disregard it and try to poo-poo it. But mostly, what's going to happen to a great extent is people on their own, directors, writers, producers, anybody, actors, are just going to start creating on their own, and then they'll say, "I want it to be like this, sort of like this, whatever this is." The reason I'm bringing all this up and jumping so fast is I know it's like a subject that people want to be able to feel almost safe in understanding what the problems they think are. Those
Mm.
problems that production designers most of the time feel that they are up against is nobody understands what they do. And so
and
now
that goes beyond just around the table at Thanksgiving, where nobody understands what you
I'm
do. It's so
saying,
much broader,
well, it's
right?
because you're an artist, but you're also in a process where you have to be so strategic and so left brain in what you do in relationship to the production that you have to be a master in both realms. So you're constantly traversing these two realms. That's not entirely normal for most people to traverse. Not entirely abnormal. I'm just saying it's specifically ingrained and part of the job to have to split your brain and do both sides. You got to
Yes.
have the vision. You got to be able to come up with things that the director wants to hear and be able to manifest them and then put them through the process of all those hundreds of people that act out what it is to build a set or to budget it or do anything that they do. Take you on location. So it's already split into those two, and people traverse back and forth and they have trouble because they know inherently that they're vulnerable whenever they're not on one solid thing or the other. They're being creative or they're being strategic. But what about the probably 85% of the time you're actually traversing back and forth? So then you're actually sort of vulnerable because what are you serving? Which part of the the Godhead, the two sides? And it's always both, really. Maybe one manifests more, one less. But if you do one side of the job only, not the other, you'll never make it through to I don't think for very long and because you have to be able to talk both languages. And
Yes.
that language is his own language, be talking back and forth. So that gets you into levels. The levels can only, for a production designer, I think, really ultimately be grasped, for me anyway, I'll just speak personally, when I get all confused with all the things that I just said. And then I go, yeah, but where are you? and I look at where I am. I can look down at my feet. I can see where I am, and I can go from there. Now, if I'm 3,000 miles away on a location, or I'm somewhere in a digital realm in my mind, those types of where am I questions give rise to who I am and who I'm talking to and what it's about. And that's what I think was happening so powerfully up on that hill at that time that you experienced, and maybe even the last time to some degree, maybe not the same. And that is, it was very clear where we were as a group. We were all thinking different things. We had various thoughts, we had various things to say from our perspectives. But the where you were over those 3 or 4 days that you'd been there refined it very clearly where we were. And then from there, a lot of people, I think, felt more comfortable with how they were seeing the world. And it happened to come from a place that was an amphitheater with a lot of people that you liked. They were production designers. And you thought, I'm just projecting. Yeah, why isn't it like this all the time?
What I love about everything you've just said is that it's raised a lot more questions than answers. In other words, every sentence you've just spoken has brought to mind a different thought or question to further explore that idea of where you are. I rewatched the film Lawrence of Arabia the other day, and that to me is the key takeaway of that film is the big question, who are you? I wonder, do you feel it's possible to answer that question, where are you, without knowing who you are first?
I think, anything's possible. I don't really think that I could fly. But then again, I've been in airplanes and I've flown. So I think that I would say invariably don't know who I am, but that I often find the clues in where I am. So that to me, it's a little bit of a reverse. And I think that's probably why, partially as a traveler, as a young person from the age of 17 on, multiple trips out of the world, I have learned that the traveling itself and being somewhere helps me to understand who I am because I am in a different context than the one that I was in previously. So that which is common to me in both places or even different helps me to see who I am.
Mm.
And it's not that I don't have any singular focus ever. It's that it does shift, and then of course it comes back around in cycles and various ways it manifests over and over again. Whether it's a voice in my head, an image that I see of myself, or how somebody else sees me, something that I with a loved one want to be consistent with. Or just am consistent with way beyond my own knowledge. That's part of who I am. So I don't I don't look to understand me first and then go into the world. I think I'm kind of tend to be the type of person who's have have mind will travel, and it doesn't mean that I'm physically so into traveling these days. I will travel, but not for the extended periods of time that I used to, given what the nature of my job was to go out into the world and find locations and then bring them back and then work with them in the digital realm as well. And I see that type of traveling now and where I am to be different than how I saw it before, but I know that it's instinctively the same. So, like when I, for instance, enter into an AI program like Runway or Midjourney, but particularly Runway because it's the one I've had access to that's put things in motion. I'm not very developed with it, but what I can see is that how I interface with the app and what it does And then what I do is always helping for me to define who I am at that point. And one of the things I like about it is that as a process does what my collaboration processes do. It's different because I love people, but I love the collaborative back and forth between something that's outside of me that helps me to get way beyond where I am myself, my own thoughts would be. I don't like that outward thing that, in this case, AI, to impose so much that I then don't feel like I'm myself.
Mm.
That's a feeling thing. So I'm either turned on or I'm not to the collaborative process. And I'm somebody who's been extremely turned on and blessed, I would say, with finding production design even as a job that has allowed me to participate with other people to create something bigger than not only I would create, but even the sum of the parts that we all would create. And that's why I believe in it so much on what I would actually say is a spiritual level, because it gets beyond my own ego, my own identity, and I don't try to possess it. And I can see how many other people seem to take away such pride and good feelings by the process of creation in the various things that they can contribute when they're working on a movie that they believe in. Because it's a lot of work. No matter what you do, if you have to wake up early in the morning and be there and be on and accountable to other people, it's a lot of work. And
Mm.
so you can know that no, in fact, it's almost suspect if making a film or some version of what you call a film is easy or a piece of cake, because then it's not maybe going up against some of the aspects of reality that make it so difficult. It might just be people getting along, showing up on time, being accountable. And then, of course, are the ideas really good, and are the emotions that are expressed vibrant in such a way that people can relate to them? And I think that to some degree, we all bring quite a bit of that to this job, but mostly that level is only visible from the outside to what an actor, maybe a writer, and maybe a director sometimes can bring to the production. Everything else is pretty much just, it's like it must have just been there. And I don't fight against that. I just acknowledge that that's part of the job to create that which was always there. I mean, think about it like a typed page that you get a script. That narrative and those characters and what they say are typed onto a white paper, or let's just say even it's a computer screen. But what's there is the world that they are participating in supposedly was there before they walked into the scene and started their narrative.
Mm.
So then you're literally back filling in the white paper or the blank space in the computer screen from what's not there, but to appear as though it was always there. And it just happens to be the perfect place where the door is in the right place, so the reveal happens in the right way, and someone can pick up the gun or the flowers, and it all works perfectly. So it's an amazing moving forward to create a narrative and an action that people can relate to, but it's also at the same time you're going backwards to fill in what has to be there in order for that to move forward. Which, of course, for me personally, just if I'm riffing like that, I just say, well, that's just Back to the Future too.
Mm.
That's how I, just you go back to go forward, you go forward to go back, and just
Yeah.
flip around in time.
Well, amazingly, I think, one of the great joys of being a production designer is that time traveling is sort of part of the job description in a sense, right? And not just in the literal sense of, within Back to the Future, but in your mind as well,
Yeah.
tracing back memories of your own life and your own past and channeling those memories to create something that actually evokes a great amount of truth in whatever project you might be working on at the moment.
Yeah. And also, even the literal side of projecting yourself from the here and now into the past. So you have the period films Then you have the ones that are called present tense, and those are interpreted, right? They're just like there's a whole idea usually how the present tense is being portrayed. And if you don't think that ever shows up, just take a look at Westerns throughout the era, all the eras, and see how they differ. They're the same place, Dodge City and Tombstone are the same, but they sure look differently. I mean, the facades are sort of the same, but the feel of what's at stake and who's the hero and all that stuff. And then, of course, you take those types of stories, historical and present tense, and then you extract the metaphor, right? And then you project them into the future if you want a futuristic movie, right? And then that's as important as the specific predictions and technological things that you're doing in the movie, certainly to the directors, because the directors want to know why they're telling that story emotionally, because they've got to talk to the actors. They want their movie to emote. So those are multiple levels that are not easy to talk about, but we're not making it all up. The way to think about it has been thought about for years by various artists and philosophers, and particularly in Greece, because they valued actually examining something, their lives, anything that would be of value. You think, well, that's just a given. It's not a given. That's a thought. And in fact, that thought of examining your life and maybe even determining that you don't know, even after you've examined it, that thought was so threatening to Greece, a democratic Greece, because of what that would mean for the kids, the younger generation, if they thought like that they put Socrates to death by giving him hemlock. So these things that go around, I actually think that we're creating all sorts of philosophical points of view when we create the imagery that we do. But it's just below the level where it's going to get called out, and then we're going to get guillotined, for having that idea. But whether something comes across, as idealistic, or what idealistic even means, from whose perspective, we battle that back and forth. And in fact, even at the conference, there was a number of issues that are both philosophical and political that come up as though they're adjuncts or extensions of what we do, and we're not even the primary people driving the creation of it. In terms of the financing or the focal point or the getting it sold out to the audiences, and but it's still something, and that something we have time to be thoughtful about at times, to articulate. And for me personally, I just feel like I was very, very fortunate to be involved with such strong filmmakers who had such great visions, and that their visions went out into the world and they resonated with people, so that there's a little bit of a dialogue with what those movies meant, either individually or as a group of movies. And so that just makes it nice for me at this stage to celebrate that entity of work, all under the category of production design. And I'm not so much a part of now, where it's going in terms of the technologies or how one does things, and which things are better than other things. I'm much more glad that I got to live in a time when the resources were there, and I was given the opportunity to play in that field with people who were as open-minded as they were, and particularly towards me, and supportive, so they didn't constantly make it difficult for me to just to be, let alone do my work.
I understand that. I think one thing that you said that really resonates with me, I actually want to jump back to ancient Greece for a moment. And one of the things is that I think everything kind of is cyclical in a sense. This is a book called The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. I don't know if you've had a chance to explore this book.
I
One of
do.
the things that I rather enjoy about it and that really resonates with me is this Paula Shear designed cover of the circle.
Mm-hmm.
And because to me, the circle means a tribe. It means, gathering around a fire and telling story. It also means this kind of omnipresent eye, this over, that ties to the evil eye, but also it ties in the specifics of Greece to the ancient theater, which was this round space where audiences and actors existed under the same light, which was a light from Apollo, the natural light, as opposed to the artificial theatrical lighting that exists today. And I think that really, in terms of the dynamic between an audience and actors and a story being told and a shared experience, I think there's something about the energy of that space. And I'm speaking specifically of the ancient theater in Epidaurus, where I had I was able to go spend some time there in 2021 when I was making a film. And what struck me the most about that place is the healing centers. The ancient healing centers were built on the same property as a theater, and it was part of the healing process for those who were sick to go spend time at a space where they were surrounded by music and poetry and theater. And that was in a sense, spiritual cleansing, and not to suggest that it's a substitute for modern medicine or that hallucinogenics might not have been involved to some degree. But the idea of art healing people and actually perhaps shedding a light on something that somebody experiences internally and colors their understanding of the world is something that I think is really profound and something that I think relates directly to that process of production design, which is taking something rather abstract and creating a concrete product, something that is actually built and used and filmed on.
So the place that you had this experience was Epidaurus. That's what you called it?
Epidaurus, yeah.
And where's and then you were on a movie experiencing it?
Yes. I was assistant art directing a Disney film called Rise in 2021. So I spent 6 months in Greece. And the best part of that experience for me was, of course, making the film was brilliant, but having the opportunity each weekend to hop in a car and drive 2 hours in a different direction, not knowing what I would arrive at. And to me, that was the most important part, is that I didn't actually plan. I planned a general region. I didn't plan a specific activity or event that I was,
It's
arriving at.
That has a I'm very glad that you said that because I get to share this. I learned from someone who had worked with the director Bertolucci, the Italian director who did Last Emperor and Last Tango in Paris. He also
Yes.
did The Sheltering Sky, and he did, I think it's called The Little Buddha. It's called, and um, this producer worked on that with Bertolucci, and when they went on their first recce to the Himalayas, I think it was in Kathmandu and outside, he referred to it as an atmospheric pilgrimage. So I thought that was a pretty great poetic way to think about those initial recce's or reconnoiters, those scouts, whatever you want to call them, where you want almost the environment to tell you what it wants or what it can do for you in relationship to what you have in your mind as a narrative for the movie. Now, when that's based upon a movie that you've been hired to do, then you go and you hit those marks based upon, the getting to the place, the hotel, how is it going to function, what works, directors, everything. I've been through Greece as well, making up a movie as I went to places. So it would tell me what wanted to be in the movie and then associatively why that would be there in relationship to the idea that I had about what movie it was. And that movie, by the way, it was something I just characterized. And in fact, I'll send you something that I did in AI about it. But it's about the idea of an eighth day, because it's beyond the 7-day week, but it's accessible in Greece and certain places. And when you're there, I think Greece itself can invoke that feeling. I think that's part of what was happening on Spetses, is you lose the sense of that we're just production designers at the end of a 4-day weekend talking about X. You go, wow, this is vibrating on a different level. Now, to a little level, that can be something you can use in a movie, and sometimes you can get a big hit, and boom, that it makes a big difference in the movie when you lock in and you can do the movie, and all the answers start happening. That happened to me on Lincoln just by going to Richmond and realizing we could do the whole movie there in 4 places. So it's a small instinctive thing to be attuned to, that where you are matters, and it's a little bit open-ended, and it's got a kind of atmosphericness to it. But the pilgrimage is that you're on the track of the spirit, a place that's going to then feed back to you information that will matter to you on whatever level you're seeking it out, for a movie or a personal journey. And so you're having that experience in this place, which I'll look it up, Epidaurus, is definitely worth your mind it, think about it, write about it, talk about it, just while it's still there, understand it to the degree that you can right now. Because what you're doing now with this whole podcast and calling it this height, it's all related, and it will all be revealed more specifically to you what you're doing when you get a little further down the road. You probably already instinctively understand it, but I'm just saying it's not unrelated to that journey of going out and thinking and finding what you found.
It's a quest. It is it's an ongoing journey that that I think it's about arriving at some sort of an understanding. But what it is that I'm even trying to understand, I think it reveals itself with time.
Yeah, and it's in motion, so it doesn't become a thing, and then you get to carry that thing in a backpack and then take it out and then have it for sure. But every once in a while, you can go into a riff like for 3 or 4 days or a week or maybe even a month where you can count on it, and then it goes away, and then you're somewhere else and you go, wow, where's that? God, it's almost like that was just a part of my dream that happened, not that it really happened, but its existence speaks the language of dreams, and in your brain, and so then that way it gets be carried as nothing for however long, maybe a lifetime. You just don't even know. So that's what you're getting, I think, in Greece, is that all those old things are still speaking in a certain language that you get the information. And anything you can imagine that would be a lot to go through, that you think, now that's the test of time, that place in Greece has withstood it, because it's already been, it's had Alexander the Great go way out into the world, and it's had the Ottoman Empire and the Romans come and trash it. So everything that it's there resonating with is a life cycle that is so much bigger than what we as any individual human being can have. Even a whole decade after decade, even 1,000 years is not enough. So these things that we get to experience when we go out in the world, if you're fortunate to have anything bring you to Greece, so that you have Greece in your life, then you've got it forever. I think, at least those that maybe some who just have a great time on an island, or that's a different thing. But even that's a form of it, because I mean, where else do you go to see all these beautiful naked sculptures everywhere? I mean, it's really something. So
it really, really,
I think for the production designers, it's a place that just over and over again renews itself. Now, what does it renew? Is it renew an understanding? Is it a vulnerability, a confidence, a strength, a vision? you never know. I mean, people have all sorts of levels that they draw upon truly to be what we value the most, which is to have some vision that's realized. People can talk about it, philosophize about it. Sometimes that's, you know, dicey. Um, but I love that we as a group truly value this visual side of what's presented, and then to understand, as I think I do, I don't know the exact figures, but I don't know what percentage of the population of people um, visualize as a methodology for their thinking and their feeling.
Oh,
But
that's an interesting thought.
it's not everybody. And when when people are upset that they're dealing with people who are not visual or not imaginative in the filmmaking process, what they don't understand is those people love movies too, but they love going to the movie and seeing all that happen to excite and inspire that level that they don't have naturally. So they're in love with this thing, this drug that's manifest, but just because they can't create it doesn't mean that their relationship is any lesser in terms of how they live into it. We tend to, as creators, think since we created it, ours is a more primal relationship. I'm not sure about that. I know that it is what it is. I value it greatly in me, and I love the conversations I get to have with people who are coming at it both visually and to some degree philosophically and emotionally. Um, but the whole group is what it takes to get it out and into the world. And that's why, the left brain side of our work is so important, because you can have all these ideas, but if you can't make it work within the production, you just got nothing but friction, and you're fighting the good fight. And if you want to do that, if that's what you want to spend your life doing, fighting, then more power to you. However, the people you're fighting, I would warn most artists, spend all their time understanding what position they're in, where they are, and they will protect that at all costs. And while you're thinking about what color something should be, they're thinking about how to defend their left flank and progress on their right flank in one way or another. So, and they're smart. So that's why it's so difficult to be creative and political and not just have both those two things consume your life as an artiste,
Yes. It's funny, I was reading the Dean Tavoularis book that came out recently, and Dean had mentioned that he believes the production. I, I think roughly the percentages he said was 80 or 85% left brain in terms of the scheduling and money and group dynamics piece of it, and maybe 20% is when you really get to explore deeply the creative vision, if you will, and find a way to bring those two together. But I do think that the spiritual way of thinking uh, ties directly to that in terms of how do you show up in the world, how do you interact with other people and value them as human beings, not as people who are trying to make your life harder when you're presenting your set designs or your budgets. I think it really is like so tied intrinsically. It's almost hard to separate by a percentage the right brain and left brain piece. It's like
Mhm.
it's so it's
Well,
it's it's so combined.
let me ask a question.
Yeah.
And this is going to sound a little, I don't know. Well, it'll sound however it sounds. I don't know. Okay, let's just you as an example, and you're probably somebody who I would say is more inclined to see what could be termed spiritual aspects to whatever it is that you're engaged with. Okay. And for a moment, let's just look at as though the subject of this is production design, the job of production design. How spiritual is it? Okay. Now, the first thing I would say is compared to what? Okay. Now let's just look at no, because what else are you gonna do? You're gonna say,
That's a great point.
well, okay. Now let's just compare it to going to church every Sunday. That's one day a week, and it lasts for however long that experience during that day lasts. And let's just be very generous and say it's 8 hours from the time you get ready and you get dressed and you bring your family together, or you at least know that you're going to see some people that you know from before. Maybe it's a priest that you like, or a rabbi, or an imam that means something to you, or a Buddha, uh, some kind of something that brings you and that group of people together to have this experience that's a religious, or I'll say spiritual. In that particular case, it's actually religious, because I've identified 4 different religions as well. But I'm just trying to say that's maybe the height of most people's spiritual experiences in the course of a week, and that's if they're regular with that, right? And then many people, particularly my generation, like to make a big deal out of that. I carry it with me. It's me, and it's in me, and I take it with me. And so I take it to my work and how I conduct myself with people. So let's just add on to, I'm making all this up, but I'm saying let's add on to the 8 hours and give another 1 hour a week where they hit something that's pretty darn spiritual in how they get what they get out of it. So that's 12 hours. No, 13 hours. Now a week. So I'm just trying to have any kind of way to measure this, which of course is impossible. But I'm taking it on that way for a moment, just to get back at production design as compared to what? Now, remember those 13 hours, you didn't get paid for any of that. So it didn't help you other than spiritually and community wise, and maybe your mindset as to how you function, but you certainly didn't get any pay. In fact, you probably had to pay for some of that with donations or whatever. It helped you with the other part of your life, which is to have rent paid, and experiences, and food and family and all that stuff. So I think I've been way 13 hours and you're not even getting paid. Okay, but people want to do it for the obvious reasons. Now, if you look at a job that you're going to have to go to get that money from, and you look at what's available to you and what you could be doing and make credible money with, that will get you anywhere near the money with the lifestyle that you have, you know that there's not so many jobs that you're going to have access to that are going to get you a certain amount of spiritual something coming back to you. And so I don't know how much that's going to give you when you are a production designer. But let's say you get, for the 5-day week, you get 1 hour a day where you hit something that, even when it was a real messed up day, you're going, but I like this. This is pretty, just great. And look what's getting built, and conversation I had or whatever. So obviously I'm in a way, apples and oranges kind of thing, where you can't really compare, because there's the payment, the spirituality, the whatever. But the fact that you, per se, now not everybody would say that there's something to be had on a spiritual level from production design, and to get paid for it, even with the possibility of it, and that it might come even later after you've done the work and then the movie's out and then it means something to you or someone else or whatever. All I'm trying to get at is, I think it's magical on a spiritual level that we could have any access to something that could potentially pay as well as it does, be a job, and even get you a few of those hours that you might be able to get from something that was actually not just spiritual, but even to the point of religious. I'm not trying to say production design or movie making is a religion, but I will say that it's a type of drug, because it makes my brain go to that creative place, which is got dopamine, serotonin, and something else, and then it gets actually realized, so that it's not just my own thought and I had a good time and nobody else knows about it, or I did a nice drawing or whatever it was. So, and because it's collective, we can all kind of look at each other and say, hey, we did a great job. This is really, I feel so good about this.
Yeah.
So I'm a big proponent of not only the job of production design, the fact that it exists at all has as much credibility as it has, and more than when I started, even though it's not understood. But, when you look at some of the stuff that people have been creating and who they are and how they're doing it, um, think of the last year and a half that Nathan Crowley's just had. What
Yeah.
what do you want out of, if you want to be creative, you want to be creative on a big scale, and you even want to do it not all digitally, what more would you want out of life? And with a nice director, actually, from what I can tell. I met him once and talked with him. I mean, he's not like a total maniac.
And by the way, on another level,
and by the way, what he created too. So I'm not just saying as the work, but I'm saying both. And at this particular stage of his life, when he has done so much, to be able to pull together so much, I would say that's like, wow, just wow. And I'm very glad to know that I know him as well as I do, which is not that well, but I know that he's of the same tribe, and I know he almost came down degrees.
Yes, yes. And and the other thing too is to add another layer to the Nathan's year in particular, to interact with something uh as essential, an American story as The Wizard of Oz, which is so weaved into the fabric of our country, the world, but also our country being sort of the American fairy tale.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of is at another level, because then you start existing within the dream world as well. But I don't want to go off on that way. I did want to say,
but wait, just to address that for a second, that little branch that you just indicated, from Nathan's point of view, as a production designer, I actually got to touch the beginnings of that project a little bit. So I have a really good idea of how much that was to take on. And I know the regard I have for The Wizard of Oz. That branch of creating that movie in Great Britain and having it be as successful, I think, as it is at conveying an international metaphoric message that really hits the mark as being American, but also translatable, is a big plus to, and I know what it took for Mark Platt to bring that along all these years, and to wait for the right combination of people. And they got the right combination of people to come. And I'm not going to deny, nor would I ever have any interest in that, but I'm going to celebrate the spiritual level of what that movie means to me personally, and what I think it actually means to a lot of people, to have another version of The Wizard of Oz told from a different perspective, that is not parochial and small and kind of trying to make a point. It's making points on so many levels and such a broad range of entertainment and artistry, from the voices and the acting, to the story, to the point of view, to the visuals, and the visual world that Nathan was at the head of creating. I wouldn't even back off this level that we're talking about as to say what the accomplishment to me personally is worth. Whether it wins every award for everything, that's a whole other thing. What it is for me personally is an epiphany of a journey that started before I was born, because that was The Wizard of Oz of 1939 that I watched on TV when I grew up. So, and shows up in my work, even in Avatar. That's why Quaritch says you're not in Kansas anymore, because that's how I took it. That's my bringing The Wizard of Oz into Avatar. This version of The Wizard of Oz is about The Wizard of Oz. And we even have one more to go, which is even more amazing to talk about midway. To me, I think that's got a spiritual component. Maybe just because I know so much about it, but I celebrate it for that.
I agree wholeheartedly. And The Wizard of Oz, huge, profound impact on my childhood. It's one of the main reasons that I've taken this path.
I think after all these decades that I've experienced and my mentors experienced and that the film industry has experienced since its inception, there are certain people who are hired onto movies who have it as their job description, let alone what their innate intuitive abilities are about, to be sensitive to where they are. And where they are can, for those people, and to as much as they can extend that idea or feeling, be something that you can call spirit of place. The spirit of place does not exclude any religion, doesn't exclude any spiritual discipline whatsoever. It just means where you are matters. And to us, it has to matter because the director is going to turn to us and go, where are we going to do this? The producer is going to look and say, where is this being shot? Where is this? The where, the writer and the director and everybody else is the who and the what and the when and all that, but where is a purview that's not only ours, but if we can bring something to it by saying, like, to me, sometimes being out in the world and literally having it be like places are auditioning, like, I want to be in the movie. Put me in it, I'll be in the movie this way, and I can be accessible in this way, and then to make your week, I can do this, and this. You can have this at the same place. Now you've got a week's worth of shooting, and the UPM goes, "Oh my God, thank you! You just took away 4 moves with all the trucks." That's just the riff that happens from the spirit of place revealing itself in such a way that it can work with the vision that you have as where something should happen for a particular movie. And I don't think that we're in any way saying there's a qualitative better or worse. Does something fit, and who's intuitively putting together that puzzle? It's not just us, location managers and scouts and DPs and producers and tax credits and a million other things are at work at this. But it all does kind of come down to funneling through an art department, quote unquote, or production design team to help put it together, and with the visual effects and where does one thing start, when does it stop. So there are all those pragmatic things, whether you plant the tulips or you don't. All that kind of thing is a little bit of a building blocks that every one of those decisions can be made to be the most pragmatic, left brain, strategic as possible. But when you do it long enough and you approach it when there's nothing there, and then you're trying to make something happen that everybody gets excited about, the visuals and the possibilities of making it work, it's vibrating right at the edge of the spirit of place is helping you to make the movie, and you're tuned into it. That's why I think, say that the spirit of place matters. So if it's spirit on any level that I feel like I can intuitively understand, then it is to some degree spiritual at that moment. Now, if I can attach that to other little inklings of spiritual things that happen to me in my life, or I know other people have spoken of, then I like kind of riffing in that zone and see where they take it, where I take it, and what's the audio version of the same kind of inspiration. That's, I mean, Zemeckis, when he came out to see the where we did Forrest Gump and built the house and filmed all these scenes on this one land, his response was, "Well, this place is talking to me." What does that mean? I mean, it was obviously the visual was working, but then it was starting to tell him all the scenes that he could put into this place, and then again have a base that meant we no longer had to go into a town for, like we were playing a week in a town, and then suddenly we had one day because everything got to be folded into this one land, and we're going to go somewhere else for Vietnam, and suddenly that became there. The Jenny's tree, Jenny's farm, Forrest house, everything just suddenly we're there for a month. So now you just feel like, well, now this is where Forrest Gump lives.
Yeah.
But the phrase was, it's talking to him. That means the old oak trees were saying, "Yeah, shoot me, shoot me."
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what else to call that.
Yeah, it's. I think you hit it. Yeah, it's.
And the UPM's going, "Thank you very much. We just saved." But I the way I put that together, that was going to cost us blah. But now we just do all this here. And I know I've been a part of many, many memos that have saved tens of millions of dollars by just rethinking how to design the production. So it's a left brain, right brain thing that we traverse. I just choose to, at this stage in particular, celebrate the spiritual component of it, not to be in conflict with anybody's anything. Certainly not their spiritual points of view, religious points of view, or political points of view. It just does this seem to offer a solution to have this vision realized? And when I've gotten old enough to see this repeat itself in various forms over and over, that's what I've got to see is, this looks different than this, but it's really very much in line with this same thing happening as seen from a broader point of view. And usually that broader point of view, frankly, is pattern. You see the patterns of the creativity and how it emerges and makes itself go through, and those things that help things succeed, and those things that can be so detrimental, ultimately they can undo the whole thing. I know this is very esoteric. It's very abstract to most people. What are you talking about? You're just picking a color and going to go pick a location or do something in the computer that we're going to like the looks of and just move on. And the funny thing is, that is all it is, except that other people would be doing it, except for some reason they either don't want to or they can't. Meaning they had their chance. They've had a chance 2 or 3 times, but particularly they had their chance. When the computers came in, the ability to just keep the production designer like really relegated to a small part of this equation was there, and for some reason it never got filled. I'm very happy that it didn't. I'm glad I got to traverse that time, and I think we're upon a new one now.
Yes,
with AI. There's no question that everybody is going to be looking at it and see what it can provide, and as it evolves quickly, stay at the whatever. And so the idea, I would just say, just to return that as a moment, because that's looking now and into the future, is recognize, especially as a production designer, how often your job actually is to prompt or to be prompted by the director or whatever the situation is, by who, and then what you do with your various collaborators, how you prompt them in order to get things to move where you want them to move, given how big some of these movies are and how complex they are. So it's not actually a methodology that's foreign to you, but you do have to learn the language of it and how the interface works. It's not so much it's not so much a application, or it's not. I don't think, when people say, "Oh, AI is just a tool," well, it's not just like a shovel, and it's not just even a computer is a very complex tool that if that's what you want to say. But this is an interface, and it's an interface not with something that is actually a consciousness, but it's a very, very complex and sophisticated curatorial process that its ability to come back fast is one of the things that maybe it's deficit, and really getting it into the specific thing you want it to be, that's difficult. However, having it value coming back to you with something quickly is quite a interesting dynamic to behold, I think. And particularly as I've gotten older and I'm slowing down in so many ways, but to interface with this speed and this quickness and try to understand what it means to me and then what it might mean to someone else or not. And that's open to everybody. But I say that only because I'm certainly not one who wants to just look at what I've done and then hang on to that as much as try to take what I've done, turn it into nothing, and then carry that no thing forward.
Mm. Yeah. Well, that's brilliant. And I agree that AI is very much here. It's very much, as you said, at the table, and it is going to change the way things are done, and it is, I think, very much a collaboration. It's very much a conversation with the tools to to arrive at something that means something, It's not just a show me this and that's it. It is very much a back and forth. And so I'm very intrigued and excited to see how it continues to, um, work its way into our process as production designers. And I know it will.
Oh, it already is.
It is. It is.
You don't know anybody who's not using it and using it as part of their presentations, but they don't say it.
That's true.
I'm just saying, I'm not, it's not like a secret.
No, of course not.
It's what I'm saying is how we do what we do, we're artists and we have to be adapt. Doesn't mean, I'm not saying everybody has to use AI. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's just there and it's going to be part of a dynamic you're going to be up against in some way or another. And it's an amazingly complex thing. So many implications that I can't even begin to comprehend. And some of them are very fearful. However, it's not something I even knew was on the horizon, really. And then when it just turned on a couple of years ago, it was so interesting to me to see how fast and out of the gate it already was. And I'll just give you one last little point of reference then as to how I see it. I was wondering, my mother is 99, and when she was in her mid 70s, in the 90s, she had to of course get used to email, the internet, and then doing her mail by email. So she was my age, having to change her whole idea about how she would interface with people on the letter level. And it was a big deal to take that on and then grow to, and it all happened relatively fast. She wasn't particularly good at it, but she was certainly kept up and everything. And I was always wondering, well, what's it going to be for me? Because I know something's going to come. It's only going to happen more. And here it is. Like, this is one version for me in my mid 70s where I have to respond to this, not for professional reasons, just because I can see it's part of so many other things that are coming. And I think it's going to come faster and faster. And so for me personally, I'm interested in what it means to my consciousness to interface with it and how can I adapt. Because when you get older, particularly what I call level 7 in my 70s, everything's that way. You're trying to adapt to so many things that you don't when you're younger, particularly health issues. But it's also just because you're getting older, and it's manifesting in a way that personally I don't think it's only you're as old as you feel. You can feel good, but now there's a mortality issue that even the AI is a part of for me. And I'm just trying to see what I can enjoy about the creative process that it helps me with. So that's why I'm taking it on that way. And as an artist first, also, by the way. And then as a strategist, I'm pretty good with that part too, but I'm not really involved in big productions now and don't expect that I will be, which is one of the reasons, by the way, when I see something, not something like, but when I saw Wicked, I went, oh my goodness, this is just fantastic. Look what was accomplished. And I didn't get I didn't go into that place like I wonder how they did this or what was that. I just watched it, and I really appreciated being able to do that. And so that's why my hat goes off to it. That's why I think there's a lot of good production design out there. If the movie's good, then the production design looks good. If the movie's bad, the production design doesn't look so good.
True that. There's one more point I was hoping that you might have just a moment to share your thoughts on, which is a word that is scaropy. I've heard you riff on scaropy before.
I love that,
and I think it's quite marvelous. So I wonder if you might just provide a little insight into what that means to you, and then we can wrap up our conversation.
Okay, that's great. Scaropy is a made-up word, and I will tell you where it came from and then how it evolved. It's to tell it like you would tell Lawrence of Arabia, where you're with him on the motorcycle, and then you're going to flash back. It was it's SCOROPI is a license plate on my daughter's car. SKOROPI is the Greek version that's on my son's truck. So my wife had made into that word, and the word, what it means, and I will indicate this, but I want to take you back for a moment to explain it. It's the art of changing the definition of something so that you have a victory rather than a defeat. Mm. And it all started literally in Berkeley in the late 1960s, being stoned on marijuana and buying frozen pizza. You couldn't actually get pizza delivered in those days, believe it or not. That seems like, how did that ever exist? But there was a time you went to the frozen section, you got a pizza, took it home, put it in the oven. 25 minutes later, you had pizza. We thought that was miraculous, especially if you're stoned and you're going, whoa, this is great. But one of the times we forgot to take the cardboard off the bottom. And so the top was done, but the underside was doughy. And we all were like hippies in those days, bummed out that we'd ruined the pizza because the top was okay, but the underside wasn't, was sort of doughy. We go, oh, well, we'd ruined this. And my friend picked up the box of it, and he sort of had the front to him. He said, his name was Barry. He said, no, actually, we just messed up because we didn't buy pizza. We bought frozen scaropy. He just made up the name. Okay, so he said, and it says here that it's a delicacy that what makes it different than pizza is that the underside is still not as cooked. So it's kind of got a doughiness to it, not hard and crisp. So we all picked up this, scaropy, and we ate it, and we said it was pretty good scaropy. Okay, so that meant that rather than having terrible pizza that we would just bitch and moan about, we had scaropy that we actually enjoyed. So I took that as a kind of an idea, a paradigm shift idea. And somehow that's from 1968 till now, jumping forward to the mid 80s. And I'm working as a production designer, and I'm up against all these situations, where you have an assumption, but it's leading you into some type of situation you're not going to succeed with. So I kept asking myself, is there another way to look at this? Is there another way to shift the paradigm? And I started characterizing that as scaropy. And scaropy is not just a thing, it's a verb, it could be an adjective. But to scaropy the situation is to change your assumption about what you thought it was supposed to be so that you can actually see what you have fills the bill. Actually, at NASA, they would say things like, literally in the 60s, don't let perfection get in the way of good enough. Okay. Mm. So there's a little on that line I would kind of justify it. Now, I put St. Scaropy Church in War of the Worlds in the background. I had Scaropy beer that was in Avatar. I would work it in at various times. I called up my friend sometime, but this is more like in the early aughts, And I said, what's amazing is after all these years, I've used that stoned idea of Skeropy to be a workplace way to motivate us to come up with a better idea and make things work. He said, that's great, but you know what? You weren't even there when I invented it. And I went, what? And then he explained that he actually had come up with that before, and that actual scene that he had described to me was not something I was a part of, but I actually had visualized it so strong that I interpreted as though it was a real. To this day, I trust that I wasn't there, but it's as visceral to me as any memory I have. And particularly because but then I decided this makes it even better because it's always a concept. So if John Lennon said God is a concept by which we measure our pain, Skeropy is a concept by which we measure our gain. Now that all would be fine. What a funny little hippie story, and it went sort of into the work of movie making a little bit. But actually, when I was on Castaway and with Steve Starkey, his assistant was somebody who I got to know. And I would always talk with her when I was trying to get to Steve Starkey. And then one time she was on the phone and sounded distraught. I asked her what was wrong. She actually told me that her boyfriend had just got killed in an automobile accident. Terrible, real life, this as bad as that gets. Every time I talked to her after that for the next 2 weeks, she finally gave up her job and decided not to work. But for that next 2 weeks that I spoke with her numerous times, we would always just talk. And it wasn't about just getting through to Steve. And one time, I don't know why it came out of me in the midst of something about it's a way to look at something. I brought up Skeropy, even in as silly a way as I just did to you.
Yeah.
And we kind of had this little laugh about it, how absurd it was. Then 2 years later, I got an email from her saying that she wanted me to know that she was about to get married. She'd met somebody else. She still loved the man that she had as a boyfriend before he passed away, but that Skeropy had meant so much to her as a word to use for her to shift how she was thinking about her life. And then she wrote, in Skeropy forever, in her name. And I've always taken that to mean that little idea, even if you weren't there, that passed on, that got part of your consciousness, could help pass on to another person having almost no value in the beginning of its own. But if it can land like a little piece of sand and an oyster, can become a pearl over time. And that Skeropy actually has some of that out in the world. Even when I went to Italy to work on a movie, I brought it up to them and I asked them if they would tell the Americans who came over this story as though it had come from Sicily, and they did that. So that there's some people who think Skeropy came from Sicily. Anyway, that's the story of Skeropy. It's as simple as, can you shift your idea about how something's causing you problems to make it into something that's as good as it can be for what it is, and then you move forward.
Amazing. Perhaps in a few years, we'll learn that it actually originated at the healing centers of Epidaurus, right?
But why not?
Why not?
And it would be Skeropy with a K.
Yes, indeed.
Right? It's Italianized with an O. That, in fact, I did meet someone who was at the time and place when it really was invented, and he heard that, but he always in his mind thought it was SCA. So I don't know. Maybe that's Spanish. Skeropy is with the SCA. So it's very international, and it can be used by anybody, anywhere, whenever they need something to change the dynamic.
Well, I appreciate you taking some time to trip out a bit here. I think sometime down the line we'll have to get back in the virtual studio and talk about John Lennon. But
okay, that's quite an influence.
In the meantime, I'm gonna go get some frozen Skeropy, and I think you should do the same.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of our conversation today. I'd like to take a moment to recognize my co-producer, Gavin Mosier, and the composer of our original score, Nathan Avakian. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for our next conversation in this ongoing odyssey into the world of film design. Until next time, be kind, stay creative, and thanks for listening.